Yo, what's up guys? Hey, it's 9, I'm back. I know it's been a while, but I'm here with another hero guide for you guys. Let's not waste any more time. Here's my Tracer guide.
To win this fight.
Yeah, you got two on the point. Never mind, you got one. It's Moma, but he's at
The damage will rain in for free. Looking very low right now. Yeah, a lot of time to do because you want it, but they're cleaning up the rest of it. Both turret, but
looks like for the time being, Philadelphia Future should be able to hold on to it. Sato using primary, so not the player point where they fake that they're going up and then they just drop down and they force the defense to respond to them. Oh, there's the stick. Jake is gone. No more brigade. And well, there's the self-destruct coming.
So in terms of settings, you can just go over to the Tracer settings in your main menu. And the first thing I would recommend is you up your sensitivity. I know a lot of people like to keep their sensitivity pretty much standard throughout all their heroes, but for heroes such as Tracer, Genji, Winston, definitely, Diva, I think it's actually super beneficial that you up your sensitivity because these characters aren't very aim intensive, and it's actually, I think, just more useful to be able to do quicker, faster 180s on movements. So I highly recommend you up your sensitivity slightly for Tracer. It doesn't have to be anything too drastic, and I know pros like Prophet from the Soul Dynasty does this, and Sinatra did this before he swapped over to Valorant. And the next thing you can do is open up your reticle, go to advanced, and show accuracy. I would highly recommend you turn that off. If you keep it on, you'll see that your reticle spreads up every time you spray bullets with Tracer, and I just find that really annoying, distracting, so I highly recommend you turn that off. And I put my reticle to green, just better than white. And then in terms of abilities, I keep it pretty standard, except I definitely prefer using my blinks on my right click over my left shift. It feels more fast, fluid, intuitive using it like that. And keep your ultimate, I have mine on R. Keep it on something that you can hit reliably and fast in the heat of the moment, something you won't slip your finger on by accident as well. Yeah, and keep your melee on something super fast, accessible. I like to use my mouse buttons, but melees are super important when playing Tracer, so be sure to keep it on something reliable. So for the most part, your role as Tracer is to be on that flank. We all know Tracer is a really good flanker. You want to be in their backline, deleting that enemy backline, meaning killing their supports as much as possible. And you definitely want to be annoying and distracting the enemy team. I would probably honestly have to say that Tracer is the best flanker in the game, certainly better than Genji and arguably better than Sombra, because she's just so incredibly mobile and she has super high burst DPS, and she's definitely the best person to be going onto that enemy backline. She can dodge the most abilities, get in and out, always has that get out of jail free card with that recall, so she's definitely the person who you want to be using to apply pressure on that backline. And of course, as any flanker would do, but I think Tracer really excels over somebody like Genji, for example, is annoying and distracting the enemy team, which gives your team a lot of time to make plays. It creates space for your team, because if you're in their backline, you know their supports are going to be calling, hey, Tracer on me guys, can I get some help? You'll see the enemy team start to peel, they'll start to go on you. You use your mobility, you give your team space to push in coordinated, and then they can help you secure the kills and secure the point, and it gives your other DPS really strong pick potential. That's why I think Tracer combos well with a bunch of different heroes, but I think she really excels with, honestly, sniper heroes. I think Tracer and Widowmaker go pretty well together. I think Tracer and Hanzo go pretty well together, but it's depending on the type of style your comp is trying to execute. If you're trying to execute something like a dive comp, then of course, like, you know, the classic Genji Tracer is super good. But if you're going to run like a more standard comp, I think you want to be using your Tracer, who will be you in this case, to, you know, get in that backline, annoy that backline, try to pick off supports if you could, apply pressure, which will give your other DPS all the space they need to get some picks. If it'll, like, think of it this way, it's super easy for Widowmaker to land headshots when she doesn't have to worry about other people firing at her. And if your job as Tracer is definitely to get those people attentions so that, you know, your Hanzo or your Widowmaker can land those headshots. So she's super good at that role, and that's definitely how you want to be playing Tracer. So when do you want to be playing Tracer anyways? Well, I think Tracer you can make work for pretty much every map in the game. There are a couple maps I think she's not super ideal on, as something like Dorado, because Dorado has a lot of high ground that makes it really hard for Tracer to get onto because she doesn't have any vertical mobility. So in order for her to get to the high ground, it honestly takes like really long flanks and it's just super inefficient. I think you can still make her work, but for the most part, I don't think Dorado is a very strong map for her, but I think she really excels on control maps. Just because of the way control maps are designed, you know, both teams are pushing towards the point simultaneously. It's super easy to get in and around either the left side or the right side. It gives you super easy access to flanks. That's why I think she's super good on control maps, and you definitely want to be playing her on control maps. Now, besides the map, what I think matters more is who you're up against. Counters to Tracer is pretty much any kind of easy to land CC. Think Brigida, think McCree Flashbang, Roadhog Hook. If you get hit by these three and a couple more, you're pretty much as good as dead. So you definitely don't want to be picking Tracer every game. If they have one of these, okay, that's fine. But if they have like a Brigida, an Ana, a McCree, I would stay away from playing Tracer. It's not impossible, but if you get hit by any of these CCs, you're so low health and you're such a squishy target that you're pretty much as good as dead. And your next biggest problem, honestly, is another Tracer. This is where the skill matchup really comes into play. You can play against other Tracers as Tracer, but it really just depends on how confident you feel on your Tracer that you can duel them efficiently. So when the round starts as Tracer, the first thing you want to be doing as quickly as possible is figure out what you're up against. You gotta look at the enemy team composition, and then you need to start asking yourself a couple of questions. Can I reasonably flank into this team? Can I arguably duel their DPS? Do I need to stick with my team and play a more frontline type style? What you need to be doing constantly is form a game plan. It changes per game, per round, per enemy composition, because yes, Tracer is an excellent flanker, but like if they have that Brigida Ana, that is a pretty rough backline to be flanking into constantly, because you know the Brig is going to be constantly peeling for the Ana, and if you get hit by the shield bash or the sleep dart, you're pretty much as good as dead. So it would be really hard to be constantly flanking a team like this. I would probably not play Tracer into something like that, but if you're going to, I think you definitely need to adjust your style, because flanking into that type of backline won't be super efficient. Then you gotta think, can I duel their DPS? Is there another Tracer that I can fight with? Are there DPS Hanzo Widow? That means they're going to be super far out of range, and it's going to be really hard for me as Tracer to contest them. I probably can't if they're good enough, you know. They will always use their vertical mobility to escape them as I close the gap, and if I close the gap, it takes so long for Tracer to get to high ground on certain maps that it's not even worth it to contest their DPS sometimes. So if they're playing super long range DPS, you can't really look to be dueling their DPS constantly, because it's just going to be super inefficient, and there's a lot better things you can be doing with your time. And then you have to think, do I need to stick with my team more? Is this more of a brawl composition I'm going up against? Maybe what I want to do is kind of play close to my team, but not directly in the middle of it. Maybe you just play on the outskirts of your team, where you can be focusing the same targets with your tanks, focusing the same targets with your other DPS, where you're close by to get heals from your team. So you just have to really be thinking about what you're going up against. Can I flank? Can I duel their DPS? Do I need to stick with my team? Your game plan is constantly changing, not just per game, but per round, because, you know, it swaps between attack and defense, and if you're playing control maps, each point swaps between rounds, right? So your playstyle might be a flanking style in the first round of Nepal, but if you go to a different part, it might change entirely. So you need to be constantly asking yourself, and you'll develop a sort of sixth sense for how your style needs to adapt when you're playing Tracer in game. So in terms of Tracer tips and tricks, I think the most important thing you want to keep in the back of your head is that your recall pretty much animation cancels everything. So there's a lot of cool and clever things you can be doing with this. But personally, one of my favorites is the 180 melee recall. It's a super useful combo that you can use to finish low health targets. Because you know, sometimes with Tracer, you get the enemy target super low, but then you have to reload because her clip is so low, you're constantly reloading. And sometimes you just need that extra bit of damage. So what you can do is the 180 melee recall. And also what you can try to do is alt blink recall instead of blink alt recall, because you know, typically Tracers, you know, when they have their ultimate, they're gonna blink towards the enemy, drop their ult, then recall out. But this allows the enemy team like a half second or so of counterplay. If it's a Genji, they can deflect it. If it's a D.Va, they can defense matrix it. But by using your ultimate first, then blinking, then hitting the recall, it just gives the enemy a lot less time for any sort of counterplay. And if you can really master this skill, it'll just make landing your ultimates a lot more consistent. And another thing you can try to do is, let's say you're dueling like another Tracer, what you can try to do is blink 90 degree and ult, because that enemy Tracer is probably going to be doing the 80 spam as well, which means they're going to be moving from left to right on your screen. But if you do a blink 90 degrees to their side, then you'll for a split second see them moving forward and back, which makes them a super easy target for you to land your ultimate on, and you can use that to finish them off. And of course, using crouch and 80 spamming and just quick movements in general helps to hide your head hitbox as Tracer. It's already pretty much the smallest head hitbox in the game, but if you can incorporate sporadic swift movement, it'll just hide it even more, making you so much more difficult of a target for the enemy team to deal with. When it comes to common mistakes I typically see a lot of Tracers do is, number one, committing way too hard for the flank. There's definitely a sweet spot between going for a flank and playing towards your team. You definitely want to be flanking. It's definitely what your character excels at, but you don't want to commit too hard for a flank onto, you know, a support line that can counter you, or onto the enemy team who's just playing so far back that you're using up a lot of time. And you just want to be coordinating your flanks with your team's engagements. So, you know, you want to say, hey guys, I'm in a position to flank their support line. Go in on 3, 2, 1. The Lucio speed boosts the team in, and you engage on the flank. And if you can coordinate that in ranked games, you're gonna be super deadly. You probably won't be able to because this is Overwatch ranked, by the way, but if you can, it's super useful. And I think a lot of Tracers also don't take into account abilities that counter your ultimate. D.Va defense matrix, Zarya bubble, Genji deflects, these things can all stop your ultimate. So you have to keep in the back of your head, if I'm gonna try to land my ultimate on one of these targets or on somebody close to them, I have to be taking into account the cooldowns on this. You know, defense matrix, 1 second cooldown, you got a 1 second window to land it on the enemy support if the D.Va is nearby. Zarya bubbles, 8 seconds and 10 seconds. You got to keep that in your head. Same thing with Genji deflect. Just try to keep these cooldowns in your head before you commit with your ultimate, because you know, you never want to waste your ultimate. And honestly, another weird one I see is like a lot of Tracers actually like to ultimate the enemy tanks, and this is always super confusing because enemy tanks won't die to just a pulse bomb unless they're already low. But you know, there's so much healing in Overwatch that if you put your ultimate on a tank, it gets them to like 25% health. By the time you can finish them, they're already gonna get healed up by their main support, that it's really inefficient to be using on tanks. So use it on the DPS, use it on the supports, get that instant kill that they can't heal up. Alright guys, that's it. Thank you so much for checking out my Tracer guide. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something, or both, be sure to leave a like on the video and consider subscribing for more content just like this. And that's it. See you guys in the next one.